Hello, and welcome to the very first edition of the African Transformation Spotlight for 2023. This is brought to you by the African Center for Economic Transformation. We are an African-led, African-driven economic policy institute based in Accra, focused on Africa and connected to the world. My name is Belinda Ayamga. I am Communications Manager here at ACET, and I am privileged to be joined today by our very own Executive Vice President, Ms. Mavis Owusu-Gyamfi. We're excited to have her today because, as you all might know, we're marking International Women's Day. And today we are talking about how we can ensure that policies on the continent have a gender lens and how that can help to transform Africa. So welcome to the show today, Mavis.
Thank you.
So good to have you join us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Right. I'll start off with this concept of having a gender lens in economic policy making and implementation. When we talk about that, what really does it mean in practice?
So, Belinda, there is an approach globally, okay, and in Africa where we say that our economic policies are gender neutral. So long as we set the right economic policies, it should benefit everybody, okay? Now, in practice, it would make sense if we were all starting from an equal footing, okay? But years, decades of inequality, especially inequality towards women, means we're not starting from the same footing. You know, cultural norms, social norms, legal and regulatory norms. There were times where women were not seen as equal to men. You know, in a lot of countries, not just in Africa, but globally, we were properties of men. So there are regulations, policies, cultures, systems that has made us second-class citizens. So just the nature of that means we are not starting on an equal footing. So if you set, neutral economic policies, they will not necessarily, benefit us equally. What will happen with neutral economic policies, and we've seen increasingly, is that men get better results from it, and women kind of improve, but not much. So what we are saying at ACET is that we need to start policies recognizing the historic inequality that has existed on the continent. And we need to be intentional in our policies in recognizing that actually, unless we put women at the front, we give women an extra step, they will not benefit equally as men. So if we are setting a policy that says access to finance, okay, we shouldn't just make it a blanket access to finance policy. We should be intentional in targeting women so that they benefit from that policy. So that's what we mean by putting a gender lens on economic policies. When we are budgeting for education, we should recognize that actually we should give more to young girls. We should give more to families to enable them to release young girls from household chore labor to go to school. That's the only way in which we are going to see real equality happening.
You know, the theme for this year's IWD is embracing equity. And I see that clearly in the answer you just gave. That it's not just enough to give everybody an equal. So I might be taller than somebody. If you give us the same level of platform, we will not see whatever we want to see very equally. So I see that very clearly. Now, what does gender-sensitive policies, what does it look like when they are present or when a country has policies that are gender-sensitive, that have taken on that gender lens? And when they are not there, what's the kind of situation that we see in economies, whether in Africa or even elsewhere?
Okay. So what we are finding is that, look, we are looking for gender parity. Okay, so when we talk about gender parity, one of the questions we ask ourselves is, are women and men on par? Okay, so when a country is really focused on gender parity. They put in place the types of systems that enable women to be on par with men. So let's take countries like Ethiopia, Rwanda, who put in place intentional policies to facilitate women entering politics. Okay, so we see more women in parliament in these countries. We've seen countries that have been very intentional in saying X% of our cabinet will be female. Okay, and they've been very intentional in ensuring that that percentage of women are female in cabinet. They've made intentional policies and saying, we're not just going to put women in, decision-making positions, but we are also going to ensure that they are driving the finances for decision-making. And when they do that, we see a distinctive change.
Now, maybe I like what you just said. Based on some of the evidence you're giving, we seem to have made some progress, on such things. So where really have we made progress in reducing some of these gender gaps, and what have been the main drivers for that change?
So some of the things that we have seen in Africa and across the world is, let's look at young girls in primary school. For a very long time, there were more boys in school than girls, and then countries started to put intentional policies in place to get girls into primary school. In 2015, we had already reached 96% of young girls going to school compared to 100% of boys. And the disparity of that 4% is really driven by a handful of countries that are not quite there. So countries like South Sudan and Chad, which are around 76%, 70% roughly. So that's where we are losing the 4% on average. Now, there's a correlation between an educated girl, an improved family, and an improved income level. Okay, that is where it starts from. So when you make such intentional, investment at the primary level, you are laying the foundation for girls to have the skills and the knowledge to be real equal players in society. And I don't want this to come across as though we are treating women as economic commodity. We are not an economic commodity, but a woman has the right to choose whether they want to be in the workplace or in the home or both. Okay. What we need to do is that woman has the same skills, the same opportunities, the same legal frameworks to make that choice by design rather than being given a choice by default.
I quite remember growing up, there used to be ads that was targeted at sending the girl child to school. Yes. If you educate a man, you're educating an individual. And if you educate a girl, you're educating a nation. And from what you say, that is very true.
Yes. Right? And but I must say that these days, when we educate some men, we are educating a nation. That is, we are seeing about it.
That's true. Now, we know that we've made, and there's evidence, that we've made progress in some place. There's still gaps in some place. Based on the evidence, where we've made progress in reducing some of these gender gaps, what really have been the main drivers that you see across the continent elsewhere where improvements have been made? And what kinds of interventions have really facilitated this process?
Okay, so let's start with the overall number. Okay, so when you look at the Global Gender Gap Index in 2022, it said that we had reached 67.8% gender parity in Africa. It's great. It looks great on paper, doesn't it? But when you unpack it, it's just a handful of countries driving this agenda. And, I think recently I put something on Twitter where I said, let's stop making Rwanda the exception and make it the norm in sub-Saharan Africa. So the countries that are moving us forward are Rwanda, Ethiopia, South Africa, Kenya in some places. You can almost pick them out. And then if you unpack the data, Okay, you will see that a country like Zambia is doing well when it comes to entrepreneurship for women and is driving us forward. So countries' pockets of change are making this number look exciting. But what we want to do is we want to shift from the pockets of change to overall improvements. And we want these improvements to move at pace. So you asked me, where have we made progress? I talked a bit about primary education, okay, gender parity. We've made progress on primary education. We've also made progress to a degree on secondary education. So we are now at roughly 89% of girls going to secondary school. But again, it differs from country to country. You know, some countries are doing extremely well. Rwanda, another case in point. Other countries, less well. We go to Niger, the numbers on girls in secondary school is substantially low. So we are seeing progress in pockets of girls in education. There are 3 areas that I remain really concerned about, okay? Area number 1 is maternal mortality. Today, 550 women out of 100,000 that give birth die in Africa, okay? This is in comparison to 180 average in South Asia, and I think it's 11 in developed countries. 550 out of 100,000, you could sit there and say, oh, that's not that big. Actually, if it's your mother that has died, it's a huge thing, okay? So that is an area we have to do something about. HIV/AIDS, the number of women who have HIV/AIDS, either married women or widowed women, is substantially higher than men. I believe the percentage of widowed women in high HIV prevalence countries is about 57%. And the percentage of married women in high prevalence countries is an average of 12%, okay, of HIV/AIDS in comparison to men. It's too high. The third area is women's economic empowerment, a place that I feel very passionate about, and we at ACET care dearly about. The interesting thing is that when you look at the labor force, actually Africa looks good compared to the rest of the world. Our numbers are healthy, but let's unpack it. We then look at equal pay. Okay, and I like the way you're laughing at the equal pay in the labor force. Oh, not so great. Okay, it's a problem. Men are still earning more for work they are doing, the same work they are doing as women. Okay, but let's really look at the areas where the bulk of African women sit, which is farming and entrepreneurship. Okay. In farming, our productivity levels in comparison to men is lower. So on average, African women's productivity levels are 34% lower than men, okay? And then we go to entrepreneurship. So for example, if you look at the entrepreneurs, African women are known to be entrepreneurial. We are celebrated as entrepreneurs. However, if you look at how much profits we're making in comparison to male in the entrepreneurship sector, we are on average making 34% less than, a female entrepreneur on average is making 34% less than a male entrepreneur. But if you take, and if you deep dive into the subsectors, in the area of manufacturing, for example, Mozambique, it is 16% less profits than men, to South Africa, where it is 62% less profit, to Ghana, where is it 82% less profit. So a female manufacturer in Ghana, on average, is making 82% less profit than the male manufacturing entrepreneur. And to be honest, given the number of women in entrepreneurship, and given that we are seen as the female entrepreneurship hub of the continent, that is something we should be worried about. Yeah. So these are the areas where we are not seeing progress, and we really need to invest in progress. Now, if you give me a few minutes, Belinda, I know I've spoken for quite a bit, but bear with me. We then look at these issues. They are fixable, okay? The reason women's productivity levels and these areas exist are for issues that can be fixed, okay? So for those of, those women who have navigated hospitals on our beloved continent, okay, there is this perception that childbirth is normal, okay? And what are you making a fuss about, okay? The reason our maternal mortality numbers are so high is because the truth is medicine has made childbirth normal, okay? But childbirth is a risk. Every woman that gets pregnant, carries a child, takes that child to term and gives birth, is putting their lives at risk, okay? And if medicine has made childbirth seem normal, then if you don't have access to quality medical services and you go into a hospital and a nurse says to you, what are you making a fuss about? This is nothing. It's a problem. And that problem means that when a woman is going through maternal challenges, they have any kind of issue related to childbirth, medical issue related to childbirth, by the time the medical team have picked it up, they are critical. And that's why our mortality rates are high, okay? And you can do from some very basic principles, improve quality, access to quality maternal services across your country. Make nurses, doctors, and medical practitioners accountable to women. Don't make them feel they are doing the woman a favor. Let them be accountable to women and hold those individuals to account for looking after our treasured mothers-to-be. Okay? Countries like Rwanda invested in 45,000 community health workers. These community health workers build relationships with, pregnant women at a very early stage. They understand their medical histories, their family medical histories. They accompany them to hospital. So when there's a crisis, the hospital knows what this issue is before the woman even comes in to have a baby. And that's why a country like Rwanda between 2000 and 2015 reduced maternal mortality by 6% every single year. It's a no-brainer. It can be done. But until we value our women as human beings, as mothers, as the drivers of our economy, as the people who nurture every single one of us, men, women, boys, girls, you are held in the hands of a woman. Until we value those individuals who hold our continent, and that valuing starts when they get pregnant. And until we change that, we cannot ever say we have an equal society. Okay, we need our women have the right to agency. We shouldn't be talking about how we are empowering women. Empowering women for what? I came out empowered. Okay? And I was empowered until I walked into a classroom and society started telling me I'm a second-class citizen. Fortunately, I have a family and parents who said, Charlie, you are not second class. So, yeah, you are our child and you will always be first class. Not every girl has that. Okay, so we know it can be done on maternal mortality. When it comes to entrepreneurship, access to finance, access to legal frameworks, access to spaces to work in, access to technology, removal of basic things like online abuse will take away those norms and legal barriers that make it difficult for women to progress. Okay, and finally, when it comes to farming, Rwanda, Zambia, Uganda have demonstrated that you can increase productivity overall of an agricultural sector of an economy by doing basic things like, equal titling. Equal title the land. I married the man. Equal title the land. If a man marries me, why does he have access to my father's land? It belongs to my family. let's jointly own it. Okay, just basic things like that can make such a difference to women's productivity and income earning opportunity. Sorry, I'm suddenly on my soapbox.
That's okay.
I feel very passionate.
I know how passionate you are about these issues, but just some of the examples you've given brings me back to. So you contributed to Foresight Africa 2023, and in your submission, one of the things that you highlighted was the issue of power dynamics, right, as a contributory factor to some of these things. Really, how can some of these types of dynamics hinder the progress that we're trying to make? And how do we address it, really?
Okay. So, you know what, Belinda, that is what the next Africa Transformation Report is going to be all about. So in our next Africa Transformation Report that is due in 2024, people, watch this space. Watch this space. It's coming soon, 2024. We are looking at where have we made progress on gender equity and equality on the continent, and where have we made less progress? And then we are deep diving in the power dynamics that are hindering us from making progress. And we've identified 3 types of power dynamics from our preliminary analysis. So the first power dynamics is patriarchy. It won't surprise anybody. We are patriarchal societies, and even when we have matrilineal structures or matriarchal structures, they are operating within a patriarchal normative value. So, we are still not benefiting from it. So patriarchy is a big challenge that we have to navigate. The second issue is class, because we talk a lot about, inequality, but class inequality means that very often it's not just patriarchal norms that suppress women, okay? Women end up suppressing other women because of class dynamics. So case in point, how many of us don't have house help? And on average, a high percentage of them are women, okay? How many of us really invest in ensuring that the women who are working for us are really fairly paid, have health insurance, have access to medical care? How many of us invest in them? And where we have young relatives in our house because they've been sent to us to help us, and simultaneously for us to invest in them, how many of us are really honoring that commitment and sending these young girls to school, making sure that they, alongside doing the house chores, they have time to also study, okay? We've got to think about these things, because if we don't, then we are actually displacing women, and we are adding to the power dynamic challenge on the continent. We've seen in a number of countries the emergence of domestic service agencies. I love them. They set a fee. It's a structured fee. They make sure that the helpers are actually grown men and women who are in the house. They set standards. They must have a bedroom of their own. They must have this. They must have that. Yeah. I haven't looked into what they pay the women. I sincerely hope they pay them fairly. I haven't looked into that study. But we can actually build an economic sector out of it. Yeah. So let's think about the class dynamics and how we work on it. And then the third one is the one that is slightly sensitive. And it's been really interesting as we've moved into we've started the analysis on the Africa Transformation Report to see the dynamics between Western feminists, Western gender specialists, and African feminists and African gender specialists, and to see the extent to which the issues and research questions are led by our development partners outside, and the ones that are led by African gender specialists and African economists, or African feminists, okay? We are beginning to see a difference in terms of progress on implementation, and a difference in terms of ownership of how policies are implemented, uptaken, etc., and who owns that agenda. And I think that it's time, the research is still ongoing, so this is just a mere assumption on my side, that we might start to see a shift if this space is truly owned by African gender specialists and African gender economists and African feminists. They own this space and they look at the issues within our normative values and their understanding of these structures and how we start to shift change. I think it's really important to drive that agenda. So these are the three power dynamics that we are looking at. And we think that in all three, there is room to shift. Globally, we see a number of countries where women in leadership positions are really making a change in their countries. I mean, like during COVID, we saw the best progress was made by female-led economies. Where our female heads of state or prime ministers were women, the numbers were a lot better. And where we've seen, female finance ministers, we've seen some real changes. Where we've seen balanced boards on businesses, we see those companies doing a lot better. So for us, it's not a moral thing. It's not also just it's not just an economic thing. It's everything together. Okay. It makes economic sense, it makes moral sense, and it makes social sense to say that everybody, both male and female, should have agency to decide which direction they want to go in and how they can contribute to society development, rather than, feeling like somebody's doing us a favor. And my final bugbear, I'm just going to add this thing. Ladies, let's stop insisting that if a woman is going to be in this powerful position, they must be exceptional, okay? The world has tolerated a lot of unexceptional men. We have so much room for unexceptional women. Let's not stop insisting that we must be the best of the best to get these seats. We just need equity and equality, and we will make mistakes on the journey, and that should be permitted too.
Wow, this has been amazing. I've learned so much, and I'm sure you out there have learned so much from our conversation today. I'll give you one last bonus. Not really a question, just a statement. Seeing as it's International Women's Day and we're embracing equity, what's your pledge to embrace equity?
My pledge to embrace equity is what we are calling the ACET pledge. So at ACET, we are making a pledge to ensure we have, equity and equality within our organization. We are making a pledge to ensure that we have fair representation of men and women, or women and men, at all levels of the organization. And we are intentionally investing to ensure that we can attract more female economists into ACET, but generally into the economic policy space on the continent. And that's why whenever you see an advert from ACET, we are saying that we strongly welcome female applicants. It can get a bit lonely up here, and we are really keen to see so many of you walk up that ladder into senior positions and at all levels. So there is a network of us whom you can reach out to if you need guidance, support, etc., and reach out to me. I will do my very best to support on a personal level.
I'll clap for that pledge. And I encourage you to take advantage of this pledge. This woman here is loaded, I tell you. So please take advantage of it.
Oh, no, it's not financial.
No, it's not financial, but she's got such a wealth of knowledge and experience. I'm sure you will benefit a lot from getting in touch and being guided by her. As all of us here at ACET have been And so this brings us to the end of this episode of the African Transformation Spotlight. This conversation has been really enlightening and insightful, even for me personally. Thank you so much, Mavis, for coming on today's episode of the African Transformation Spotlight. I'd like to use this opportunity to wish all our audiences, both male and female, because we're all in this together, a happy International Women's Day. And we encourage you to embrace equity wherever you find yourself. So it doesn't matter where you are, what space you find yourself in. Embrace equity and make sure that in whatever you do, you are looking through that gender lens that Mavis so eloquently explained for us. Until we come your way next time with another edition of the African Transformation Spotlight, I've been your host, Belinda Ayamda, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.